Hey, what's up? It's Mai Yang from Mix in the Dark. February is widely known as the month of love, which is why I am dedicating this month to feature stories of loved ones who have passed away. Usually when stories are shorter, I like to bunch a few of them together for longer episodes. However, I felt it was appropriate to dedicate full, unshared episodes for those who send a story of their loved ones. These are such unique, sensitive, and intimate stories that I felt it should stand on its own. I am not a medium, nor do I consider myself a paranormalist in any way. However, I want to respect and honor the time it took my listeners to share very personal stories of their loved ones. Again, I ask you to be respectful of these stories as they are true stories shared by people who trust Mix in the Dark and its listeners. Feel free to send positive thoughts to the owners of the stories through comments, shares, and likes. Please enjoy. My grandmother was one of my favorite adults. She lived with my parents and siblings and I. She was tall and bony. Her shadow towered over little 4-year-old me whenever we took mid-morning strolls around the neighborhood while everyone else was at school or at work. We both would sit for hours in the backyard weeding out dandelions with silver butter knives in the Minnesota summers. We sat on the porch watching the pink sunrise, drinking coffee with condensed milk and bread, where I would tell her my theory about the sun taking turns to shine between America and China. The middle of the night would find me sharing with her my every nightmare and every delightful dreams. She lit up whenever her sisters visited, where they all gossiped and watched Hmong movies with me. She teased me in front of everyone by telling them that I was a kongyao red mouth. I secretly ran to the bathroom to check out my lips to see if they were red. I later learned that it was an expression that meant that I talked a lot. My grandmother taught me how to tie my shoelace to prepare me for school, and when school started, I would rush home from the school bus to tell my grandmother all the amazing things I learned that day. The changing seasons, the state loon, the Minnesota lady slipper, Groundhog's Day. I remember taking a field trip to learn about wildlife, and the guide told us that white bark aspen trees were once used to make canoes and that we should go home and tell this to our loved ones. I was very shy to express this to my grandmother, but one Saturday afternoon, I pointed to the white bark aspen tree across the street and I told my grandmother, people used to make canoes out of those types of trees. One day, I came home from school to find that my grandmother was not there. After searching for her all over the house, I learned from my older sister that Grandma had fell and broke her hip. This incident resulted in my grandmother to be bedridden for the rest of her life. Our relationship changed. Where I once was able to sleep next to her and talk until I fell asleep, my grandmother was to sleep alone on her hospital-style bed, where she would scowl and tease my siblings and I. My grandmother grew silent. I visited my grandmother's room less and less. She could no longer take walks around the neighborhood in the morning or weed out dandelions. Eventually, she lost strength to pick up even a spoon, and my dad had to hand feed her. My parents had to bathe her and take her to the bathroom. Her waist-long silver hair was cut and buzzed off. The hollows of her cheekbones became more prominent and wrinkles became her skin. Grandmother stayed that way until one night when I was 15 years old. My dad called everyone to gather around her. She passed away surrounded by everyone who loved her. After Grandma passed, I wondered if she'd forgotten about me because everyone would share their dreams of Grandma visiting them. but I had none. Even still, I never forgot about my grandma. Every big event that happened to me, I would talk to my grandma in my head. Today, I am moving away to college, Grandma. I'm going to Korea to study for a year, Grandma. What would you think of me now that I'm moving away to live on my own? Grandma, I'm grown now, and I'm getting married soon and will leave the family. I bought my first house, Grandma. A few years ago, I went through a big life-changing experience. I can't share much about it, but it shook my life. Just when I thought my marriage was working out beautifully, it all fell apart. In one day, I lost the life I worked for, my husband, my house. I fell into depression where I stopped talking to my family and friends. I started drinking excessively and was diagnosed with a major depressive disorder. I went into treatment secretly and didn't tell anyone because I didn't want them to worry about me. After a year, I slowly got better. I moved out of my first home that I ever bought and into a little apartment in South Minneapolis. My parents had no idea that any of this was happening to me. After organizing my things that first day, I curled up into a ball and fell asleep on my sofa. Grandma came to visit me. She came in the image of health, tall, lean, long silver hair tied into a flower bandana. Just like how she looked when I was 4 years old. She was laying in her hospital bed, but healthy. It was a simple dream. I fed her some rice porridge, hot dogs, and ramen. It had been years since I had seen her this lively and talkative. I woke up and immediately started bawling my eyes out. That first night was going to be one of the first nights I would be alone. My parents didn't even know I had moved to live this whole other life that so much had happened to me, but my grandma did. I sat up from the sofa to feel a safe, cozy presence around me, feeling like I was drinking coffee with condensed milk and bread, watching the sunrise with my grandmother. At my apartment, my open windows told me that the sky had almost blackened, and in the middle of Minneapolis, my street had fallen into a winter silence. My heart felt light as a feather. After all these years, my grandma had been there to listen to my stories about college and marriage. After all these years, she's still listening to this red-mouthed girl talk. I knew wherever she was now, she was at peace and watching this red-mouthed girl's adventures. We never know when our grandparents' or loved ones' time will come. It is sad to think about the life that they will miss when they are gone, but it is also heartwarming to know that the spirit of their love will always be there watching over us, always there for our life's saddest moments and our life's best beginnings. Thank you for listening to Mix in the Dark. I'm your host, Ma Ying. Mix in the Dark podcast is available on Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Pandora, YouTube, and Facebook. If you have any stories that you would like to share, please send it to mixinthedark@gmail.com.